Hello and a very warm welcome to Rajya Sabha TV. I'm Teena Jha with another brand new episode of World Panorama, the only show that gets you a weekly roundup of all that's happening in the international arena. Let's begin with the top stories. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Barack Obama to meet on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York in September. The US is now eager to engage Modi in talks. Incumbent Syrian President Bashar al-Assad sweeps elections. He is set to serve another 7-year term as President of Syria, even as rebel groups call the polls a farce. G7 countries meet, keeping Russia out for the first time since 1997. Firm warning sent to Russia to get out of Ukraine or face tough sanctions. Memories of the D-Day landings replayed in Normandy, France, as world leaders gather to commemorate the landmark World War II event. And FIFA World Cup set to get underway in Brazil. Preparations in top gear as soccer fans from around the world begin to pour in. Well, our top story this week is Modi's visit to the United States. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has accepted the invitation of US President Barack Obama for talks. He will be traveling to the United States in late September. To finalize the dates of the leaders of the two largest democracies, Indian Ambassador to the US, S. Jaishankar, will be flying to Delhi on the 8th of June. This is the time when Narendra Modi is supposed to address the General Assembly of the United Nations. The US wants to engage Modi in talks on his first ever visit to the US after 2002.
Much ahead of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's trip to the US, American President Barack Obama will be sending his special envoy to India. Assistant Secretary of State Nisha Biswal will arrive in New Delhi for preliminary talks with Indian officials. Her visit will not only focus on Modi's visit, but it will also be an attempt to understand the mindset of new dispensation in Delhi. Biswal will meet External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj and Foreign Secretary Sujata Singh, in addition to other Foreign Ministry officials.
One of the concrete ideas to concretize to take forward that relationship with the US would be on the defense side. Defense cooperation between India and the US will be an important aspect in that sense. That could revitalize the relationship.
Biswal will be the second foreign envoy to visit Delhi after Modi was sworn in as Prime Minister. Experts also feel that when Modi himself has put the past behind him, after the US revoked its ban on issuing a visa, India should move ahead with the strategic ties with the USA in core sectors.
US still is a very important country for India, and they are one of our most important trading partners, and we need US for technology transfer, etc., etc., and we have a strategic relation cutting across many sectors.
The BJP, however, is still cautious. While it wants to maintain existing trade ties, it also wants the US to appreciate India's security concerns with Pakistan. At the same time, it wants to be treated as an equal in strategic matters.
दुनिया में भारत और अमेरिका दो ऐसे देश हैं जो एक दृष्टि से डेमोक्रेटिक देश हैं और एक अच्छे संबंध जिन दोनों देशों के रहने चाहिए, ऐसे देशों में ये दो देश हैं और रहे भी हैं और शुरू से है। परंतु हम ये चाहते हैं कि अमेरिका और भारत का जो रिश्ता और संबंध है वो बराबरी का होना चाहिए।
Although there is always continuity in foreign policy, a new government inevitably means a new articulation of relationships in bilateral terms. And while both countries are significant global players in their own right, strategically, India needs the US by its side in the coming years.
And to discuss the story further, we have with us in our studio Mr. Anand Sahay, coordinating editor of the Asian Age. Welcome to the show, sir. So the most obvious question first, what do you think about Narendra Modi's visit to the US? And also, do you think Narendra Modi should have accepted Obama's invitation, considering the US has denied him a visa for so long?
Of course, I'm very glad he's going. America is a preeminent world power. It's been quite rightly noted that it does not enjoy the same overall comprehensive power as a country as it did a few years ago. But that does not take away from the fact that it is the world's most important military power, technological power, financial power, and political power. Right? Now, they have revoked the visa. I mean, Modi is now the democratically elected leader of the world's largest democracy. Right? Completely free and fair election. Whatever one may think of Modi, that's immaterial. And as far as American record goes, they have had no issue dealing with dictators. You know, the man who General Musharraf threw out Nawaz Sharif. And initially there was a lot of condemnation, criticism, but lo and behold, I mean, the Western world was back to doing business with Musharraf. So if they do business with Mr. Modi, there's no big deal about that. But I'm glad that Mr. Modi, and he's said this himself, that the relationship is not between an individual and a country, it's between two countries. Right. It is important, the US relationship is important for us, and an India relationship with America is important to America as well. That's why when President Obama was here 3 years ago, if you recall those words, that this is the relationship with India, America's relationship is going to be among the defining relationships of the 21st century. And I think, you know, there was slackening on both sides for a variety of reasons, as a result of which, in the last year and a half or so, the relationship has sagged somewhat. The ultra pro-US quarters in this country have always tried to lay the blame at the door of the Indian government for that. I do not agree with that. I think on both sides, for a variety of reasons, you know, on their side as well as our side, somehow the dynamism which existed before, say between 2005 until 2011-12, there was slackening in that. And if the new government in India is able to have a firm, concrete, result-oriented discussion with the Americans, so much the better. Now, the thing is this, the Obama administration itself has, they have taken the first step forward. Right. They've invited Modi. Had they not done so, then it would be for Mr. Modi or the Indian government to find ways of, you know, doing that, right? So it's just as well that, you know, they have asked us, and Mr. Modi, as Prime Minister, is going. We're very happy, and I'm sure they'll have lots to discuss.
Also, does it mean that Narendra Modi, he is now ready to forget the past and is also taking that step forward to reboot the relationship between India and the US, since he, you know, he's been banned for several years, for more than a decade? So do you think Narendra Modi, and also because his step to invite the SAARC nations, considering his foreign policy, do you think he's ready to forget the past and move on?
It's not a question of forgetting the past. He's not acting as an individual, and he has said so himself. It's a relationship between two countries, between two important countries. If you look at the top 20, 25 countries of the world, India very much figures there, you know. So it would be strange if Mr. Modi did not accept that invitation. Right. It is in our interest to do so. It is in America's interest to invite us. It is in both our interests to see that our relationship moves forward.
Right. Also because we've seen the US has taken the first step of inviting our Prime Minister, and he has accepted the invitation. So now what does the US government seek from the new Indian government?
Well, the US has many items on the agenda. You know, the nuclear question and the nuclear apartheid was ended, you know, when Dr. Manmohan Singh was Prime Minister. It took a lot of doing on the part of the Americans. It took a lot of doing on our part to get the civil nuclear agreement signed. Now, subsequently, you know, the American business has not gained in that they have not been able to put up civil nuclear facilities in this country, reactor in this country, because the Indian Parliament has passed a legislation regarding nuclear liability. Should something go wrong in the case of an accident, who bears the responsibility and to what extent? Now, the US business wants changes made in that law. Now, that is up to Mr. Modi's government to see whether it's possible to creatively amend the you know, what the Parliament has passed to bring it more in line with what America says is the international practice. Right. However, I mean, having said that, The French and the Russians also have similar objections. And yet, they have not fought shy of doing business with India on that front. The Americans have been much more, let's say, careful, right? So let's see if that issue would come up. The Americans had at that stage when the relationship was like expanding with UPA 1, that phase, they had talked about defense, expansion of defense cooperation, expansion of trade and economy, investments, you know, on the financial side, banking, insurance, across the board. You know, it was a wide spectrum relationship. Now, that does not mean that, you know, we should accept everything they say. We also have our demands of the US. You know, those have to be taken on board also. You know, we have our visa H-1B visa concerns. We have outsourcing concerns, which Obama is going slack by.
Right.
You know, so we have our and you know, the defense cooperation, expanding that area. It doesn't mean that we have to go along with the US on every single thing they ask for. It's not like here's our wish list. If you don't do this, we refuse to deal with you. The Americans have also, after disengaging themselves from Iraq and Afghanistan, they've got this entire pivot for the Far East region. And in that, you know, in terms of a strategic vision, India figures there. So
then what is Modi's visit going to mean for both the countries in terms of Indo-US relations?
I think if the bureaucrats on both sides prepare the ground well, then they will, it's only a one-day visit to Washington, right? And in that, our Prime Minister has to be very clear about where he sees the friendship with the US, the partnership with the US, what in his vision is the meaning of this partnership, right? On the strategic aspect, on cranking up, you know, those parts of the machinery, you know, which have gone a bit rusted, that aspect. Will India agree to go along with everything which US imagines this relationship to deliver? That has to be seen. Then, of course, we have to talk about our regional concerns.
Right.
Pakistan, Afghanistan, the issue of terrorism. We are talking. It's you know, they are meeting for the first time. Modi is the Prime Minister for the first time. Now, he has to, you know, it's a little bit of a, you know, giving the other side a full view of yourself, of your country's aspirations, its current requirements, right? And understanding their concerns as well.
So, right, because the dates have not been finalized yet, we'll have to still wait and watch. So, and since we're talking about Modi's visit, foreign visits, why do you think Modi chose Bhutan as his first foreign visit destination?
That's pretty standard. You know, Bhutan is an extremely close and important ally for India in our own region. It is one country with whom we have never had any issue at all, you know, really that. If you look at all of our neighbors, you know, at some point or another, there have been patches which have had to be smoothened, which have needed to be smoothened, which have caused worries for both sides. But not Bhutan. So, Mr. Modi will not be the first Prime Minister to make Bhutan his first foreign destination.
Right, so he's continuing with the legacy that's been going on.
Continue with it, but it's pretty standard. There's nothing odd about that.
Right.
You know, why not Bangladesh? Why not Nepal? Why not Pakistan? Why Bhutan? The answer is that we have an absolutely smooth and wonderful and important relationship with Bhutan.
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Sahay, for joining us on our show. Right, with that, we head into a very short break. Up next, top world leaders gathered in France to commemorate the D-Day landings of June 1944. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching World Panorama. Now over to Syria. Syria's incumbent president Bashar al-Assad is to serve a third 7-year term in office. Assad virtually swept the elections held on Tuesday, garnering nearly 90% of the vote. These were the first multi-party presidential poll in Syria's modern history and were held amid fierce civil war going back the last 3 years. Here's a report.
Celebrations on the streets of Damascus even before Assad's landslide win was formally announced. Celebratory gunfire even resulted in 3 deaths, nearly a dozen were wounded. Whereas Assad got a whopping 88% of the mandate, former Minister Hassan al-Nouri got 4.3% of the vote, while parliamentarian Maher Hajar secured just 3.2%, fewer than the number of spoilt ballots. The Prime Minister hailed the process as a democratic landmark for the ravaged nation.
الشعب العربي السوري امتحانه الديمقراطي بامتياز. لقد سطر تجربة ديمقراطية بأبهى صورها يصلح أن تكون نموذجا للعالم من خلال ما أفرزته هذه العملية الانتخابية من شفافية ونزاهة.
But Assad's foes, the rebels who hold him responsible for nearly 3 years of violence, have ridiculed the election. The exiled opposition and their Western backers have called the process a sham. They say the 2 relatively unknown and state-approved challengers offered no real alternative to Assad and that no poll held in the midst of a war could be considered credible.
لو نجح في ولايته ما راح نترك له سوريا لأنه سوريا إنما سوريا للشعب ما هو بيقرر بده يضل ولا يروح. كلياتنا متوقعين الانتخابات هي له، هي على كيفه وما حدا بينتخبه، هو ناجح مسبقا يعني. وسوريا رح تضل إنه حتى هلا وبعدين رح نضل بسوريا ونقاوم هالعصابات وإن شاء الله رح نحصل منه بأقرب وقت ممكن.
Detractors cite the fact that voting took place only in government-controlled areas, calling just that as evidence of Assad's limited control. Large parts of northern and eastern Syria that are held by rebels fighting to end 44 years of Assad's rule remain as volatile as they were.
الانتخابات التي قام بها الطاغية بشار الأسد هي انتخابات كاذبة، ونحن كلياتنا على علم ويقين أن الانتخابات هي انتخابات كاذبة. بس للأسف الشديد أنه هو ضمن الأماكن اللي متواجد فيها جند الناس كلياتها للانتخابات وأجبرهم على الانتخابات بسبب الناس اللي بوظائفها بعملها، وأصر عليهم أنه يقوموا بالانتخابات هذه الكاذبة، وأخذ نسبة 88% على التعيين.
Even after the elections, several parts of the country, including Damascus and Aleppo, continue to be hit by fierce fighting. Gun battles, airstrikes, car bombs, shelling and executions regularly kill more than 200 people a day in Syria. Close to 160,000 people have been killed in the conflict. Millions have been driven from their homes. Large parts remain outside Assad's control.
Friday was the 70th anniversary of the Normandy landings during World War II, often called D-Day. It was when leaders from different European countries gathered to pay tribute to the 150,000 Allied troops who lost their lives in Nazi-occupied France. The event was also used to de-escalate tensions in Ukraine. World leaders and veterans gathered on the beaches of Normandy to mark the 70th anniversary of World War II's D-Day landings. French President François Hollande opened the commemorations to pay tribute to the civilians who died in the Allied invasion.
Aujourd'hui, et c'est le sens aussi que je veux donner au 70e anniversaire du débarquement. Oui, je voulais que, en cette date du 6 juin 2014, l'hommage de la nation puisse s'adresser à tous.
Normandy was the scene of history's biggest amphibious assault. US President Barack Obama attended a ceremony at the American Cemetery along with the French President. Obama gave a poignant speech in memory of 6 June 1944 when 160,000 US, British and Canadian troops waded ashore to confront Nazi Germany's forces.
I am honored to return here today to pay tribute to the men and women of a generation who defied every danger. Among them are veterans of D-Day. And gentlemen, we are truly humbled by your presence here today.
Britain's Prince Charles and Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall, attended a service at the Bayeux Cathedral along with the British Prime Minister David Cameron and Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott. The British veterans were also joined by Queen Elizabeth, who laid a wreath. Over 3,000 World War II veterans who were present were overwhelmed to return to Normandy.
Oh, I'm overwhelmed with it all. That's all I can say. It makes me feel very humble. I suppose we do. We appreciate it, but they're all very kind to us for doing what we did, which I'm glad we did. Anyway.
On the sidelines, Russian President Vladimir Putin met Ukraine's President-elect Petro Poroshenko in their first face-to-face talks. The two reportedly discussed a possible ceasefire agreement in Ukraine as well as political steps to de-escalate the crisis, including Russian recognition of Poroshenko's election and economic relations. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And for the first time, Russia is not at the G7 table since joining the group in 1997. The decision to drop Russia was taken by the rest of the members as a result of its role in destabilizing Ukraine. The group has threatened further sanctions on Russia if violence doesn't stop in eastern Ukraine. Take a look.
In retaliation to Russia's seizure of Crimea, the G7 powers left President Vladimir Putin out of the talks in Brussels. The leaders met for the second day on Thursday after they threatened to impose tougher sanctions on Russia. Warning Russia, the group said that Moscow should help restore stability in eastern Ukraine. A joint statement condemned Moscow for its continuing violation of Ukraine's sovereignty.
Die Tatsache, dass wenn es keine Fortschritte in den Fragen gibt, die wir noch zu lösen haben, dass dann natürlich weiter auch die Möglichkeit von Sanktionen, auch schwereren Sanktionen der Stufe 3 auf dem Tisch liegt. Denn wir können uns eine weitere Destabilisierung im Zusammenhang mit der Ukraine nicht leisten.
C'est pourquoi le G7 a indiqué que le dialogue, la désescalade, le processus né des élections devait être forcément encouragé. Mais qu'en même temps, les pays du G7 étaient prêts, si la situation l'exigeait, à intensifier les sanctions.
Russia denied it is behind the revolt in the east, but it also defended its right to protect the pro-Russians. President Vladimir Putin urged Ukraine's president-elect Poroshenko to stop the fighting in the east and start dialogue with the people.
И нужно вести переговоры с теми людьми, которые не приняли этого переворота, а не посылать к ним танки, как вы об этом сказали, и не расстреливать мирных граждан с самолета, нанося ракетно-бомбовые удары по мирным объектам.
US President Barack Obama also met Ukraine's President-elect Petro Poroshenko in Warsaw, offering financial and security help.
The challenge now for the international community is to make sure that we are supporting Petro's efforts. And the United States has already stepped up in a number of ways. We're supplementing the assistance that the IMF is providing with $1 billion in additional loan guarantees, and we've discussed additional steps that we might take to help during this reform and transition process.
While Ukraine was able to hold a largely peaceful presidential election last month, pro-Russian separatists continue to operate at will in the east. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Much else has been unfolding around the world. Here's a quick wrap of other international news of the week.
China sentenced 9 people to death for what the authorities called violent terrorism crimes as part of a nationwide crackdown on separatist militants in the troubled western Xinjiang region. According to the state broadcaster CCTV, a total of 81 people were sentenced for crimes related to involvement in terrorist organizations, to intentional homicide and arson. Xinjiang is a home to a large Muslim Uyghur minority that has been beset by violence for years. South Korean President Park Geun-hye has called on North Korea to abandon its nuclear ambitions. The president, while observing the Memorial Day ceremony in the capital Seoul, also asked Korean counterpart to boost its economy to improve the economic status of its people. Canadian police have arrested the 24-year-old man who allegedly shot dead 3 officers and injured 2 others, ending a day-long manhunt. The shooting was one of the worst of its kind in Canada, where the gun laws are stricter than in the United States. Fatal attacks on the police are even rarer. Earlier, local media had released the photograph of the suspect Justin Bork in camouflage clothing and carrying a rifle.
Shifting gears, time to bring you up to speed with all the sports news that you might have missed this week. Here's all the sports action.
Chelsea legend Frank Lampard on Monday brought down the curtain on his glittering career at Stamford Bridge as he announced he will leave the West London club when his contract expires at the end of June. Lampard had reportedly been offered a new deal on reduced terms by Chelsea, but he has opted to bring an end to his 13-year spell with the Premier League team. Lampard scored 211 goals in 649 appearances for the Blues, making him the club's all-time record goal scorer. The 35-year-old's long and successful stay in West London has left him well established as a Chelsea legend after winning 3 Premier League titles, the Champions League, the Europa League, 4 FA Cups and 2 League Cups. Michael Platini thinks FIFA must hold another vote for 2022 World Cup if corruption allegations against Qatar's winning bid are proven. The UEFA president told sports newspaper that he doesn't regret his own vote for Qatar and still thinks that the Gulf nation was the right choice for FIFA and for the world football. A FIFA prosecutor plans to wrap up his investigation of the 2010 votes for Qatar and 2018 World Cup host Russia by next week. Miguel Cotto hopes to benefit from the Roach factor when he tries to become Puerto Rico's first 4-division champion against world middleweight champion Sergio Martinez at Madison Square Garden on Saturday. After a bitter 2012, Cotto joined forces with renowned trainer Freddie Roach and believed he is poised to take the WBC middleweight crown from Argentina's Martinez. The hard-hitting Cotto said fighting for the 160-pound crown should not be a problem for him. Cotto will be making his 9th appearance at the Garden with a 7-1 record there. He hopes to play his part in a New York celebration for Puerto Ricans.
Well, that's all we have for you in this edition of World Panorama. But before we go, here are some interesting visuals from Tokyo, where an aquarium is looking to create its own animal players as Japan prepares to take on its first rival in Brazil in the FIFA World Cup. Goodbye and have a great week.